In the late afternoon, it rained and the entire world was dark gray. He stood in the hall of his house, putting on his badge with the orange salamander burning across it. He stood looking up at the air conditioning vent in the hall for a long time. His wife in the TV parlor paused long enough from reading her script to glance up. "Hey," she said, "the man's thinking." "Yes," he said, I wanted to talk to you." He paused. "You took all the pills in your bottle last night." "Oh, I wouldn't do that," she said, surprised. "The bottle was empty." "I wouldn't do a thing like that. Why, I would never do a thing like that. Why would I ever do a thing like that?" she said. "Maybe you took 2 pills and forgot and took 2 more and forgot again and took 2 more and were so dopey you kept right on until you had 30 or 40 of them in you." "Heck," she said, "what would I want to go and do a silly thing like that for?" "I don't know," he said. She was quite obviously waiting for him to go. "I didn't do that," she said. "Never in a billion years." "All right, if you say so," he said. "That's what the lady said." She turned back to her script. "What's on this afternoon?" he asked, tiredly. She didn't look up from the script again. "Well, this play comes on the wall-to-wall circuit in 10 minutes. They mailed me my part this morning. I sent in some box tops. They write the script with 1 part missing. It's a new idea. The homemaker, that's me, is the missing part. When it comes time for the missing lines, they all look at me out of the 3 walls, and I say the lines. Here, for instance, the man says, 'What do you think of this whole idea, Helen?' And he looks at me sitting here, center stage, see? And I say, she paused and ran her finger under a line on the script. 'I think that's fine.' And then they go on with the play until he says, 'Do you agree with that, Helen?' And I say, 'I sure do. Isn't that fun, Guy?' He stood in the hall looking at her. 'It's sure fun,' she said. 'What's the play about?' 'I just told you. There are people named Bob and Ruth and Helen.' 'Oh. It's really fun. It'll be even more fun when we can afford to have the 4th wall installed. How long do you figure before we save up and get the 4th wall torn down and a 4th wall TV put in? It's only $2,000. That's 1/3 of my yearly pay. It's only $2,000, she replied. And I should think you'd consider me sometimes. If we had a 4th wall, why, it'd be just like this room wasn't ours at all. But all kinds of exotic people's rooms, we could do without a few things. We're already doing without a few things to pay for the 3rd wall. It was put in only 2 months ago, remember?" "Is that all it was?" She sat looking at him for a long moment. "Well, goodbye, dear." "Goodbye," he said. He stopped and turned around. "Does it have a happy ending?" "I haven't read that far." He walked over, read the last page, nodded, folded the script, and handed it back to her. He walked out of the house into the rain. The rain was thinning away, and the girl was walking in the center of the sidewalk with her head up and the few drops falling on her face. She smiled when she saw Montag. "Hello!" He said hello and then said, "What are you up to now?" "I'm still crazy. The rain feels good. I love to walk in it." "I don't think I'd like that," he said. "You might if you tried." "I never have." She licked her lips. "Rain even tastes good." "What would you do? Go around trying everything once?" he asked. "Sometimes twice." She looked at something in her hand. "What have you got there?" he asked. "I guess it's the last of the dandelions this year. I didn't think I'd find one on the lawn this late. Have you ever heard of rubbing it under your chin? Look!" She touched her chin with the flower, laughing. "Why?" "It rubs off. If it rubs off, it means I'm in love." "Has it?" He could hardly do anything else but look. "Well," she said, "you're yellow under there." "Fine, let's try you now." "It won't work for me." "Here." Before he could move, she had put the dandelion under his chin. He drew back and she laughed. "Hold still." She peered under his chin and frowned. "Well?" he asked. "What a shame," she said. "You're not in love with anyone." "Yes, I am." "It doesn't show." "I am very much in love." He tried to conjure up a face to fit the words, but there was no face. "I am." "Oh, please don't look that way." "It's that dandelion," he said. "You've used it all up on yourself. That's why it won't work for me." "Of course, that must be it." "Oh, now I've upset you. I can see I have. I'm sorry, I really am." She touched his elbow. No, he said quickly. "I'm all right. I've got to be going, so say you forgive me. I don't want you angry with me." I'm not angry. Upset? Yes. "I've got to go see my psychiatrist now. They make me go. I make up things to say. I don't know what he thinks of me. He says I'm a regular onion. I keep him busy peeling away the layers." "I'm inclined to believe the psychiatrist," said Montag. "You don't mean that." He took a breath and let it out and said, "No, I don't mean that. The psychiatrist wants to know why I go out and hike across in the forest and watch the birds and collect butterflies. I'll show you my collection someday." "Good." "They want to know what I do with all my time. I tell them that sometimes I just sit and think, but I won't tell them what. I've got them running, and sometimes I tell them I like to put my head back like this and let the rain fall on my mouth. It tastes just like wine. Have you ever tried it?" No, You have forgiven me, haven't you? Yes, he thought about it. Yes, I have. God knows why. You're peculiar, you're aggravating, yet you're easy to forgive. You say you're 17? Well, next month. How odd, how strange. And my wife 30, and yet you seem so much older at times. I can't get over it. You're peculiar yourself, Mr. Montag. Sometimes I even forget you're a fireman. Now, may I make you angry again? Go ahead. How did it start? How did you get into it? How did you pick your work, and how did you happen to think to take the job you have? You're not like the others. I've seen a few, I know. When I talk, you look at me. When I said something about the moon, you looked at the moon last night. The others would never do that. The others would walk off and leave me talking or threaten me. No one has ever time anymore for anyone else. I'm going to say that out loud again because it feels important. No one has time anymore for anyone else. You're one of the few who put up with me. That's why I think it's so strange you're a fireman. It just doesn't seem right for you somehow. He felt his body divide into a hotness and a coldness, a softness and a hardness, a trembling and a not trembling, the two halves grinding up upon the other. You'd better on to your appointment, he said. And she ran off and left him standing there in the rain. Only after a long time did he move. And then, very slowly as he walked, he tilted his head back. In the rain, just for a few moments, and opened his mouth. The mechanical hound slept but did not sleep, lived but did not live in its gently humming, gently vibrating, softly illuminated kennel back in the corner of the firehouse. The dim lights of 1 in the morning, the moonlight opening from the sky, framed through the great window, touched here and there on the brass and the copper and the steel of the faintly trembling beast. Light flickered on bits of ruby glass and on sensitive capillary hairs in the nylon-brushed nostrils of the creature that quivered gently, its 8 legs spidered under it on a rubber-padded paws. Montag slid down the brass pole. He went out to look at the city, and the clouds had cleared away completely, and he lit a cigarette and came back down to bend and look at the hound. It was like a giant bee. It was like a great bee come home from some field where the honey is full of poison, wildness, of insanity and nightmare, its body crammed with that over-rich nectar, and now it was sleeping the evil out of itself. Hello, whispered Montag, fascinated as always with the dead beast, the living beast. Nights when things got dull, which was every night, the men slid down the brass poles and set the ticking combinations of the olfactory system of the hound, and let loose rats in the firehouse areaway, and sometimes chickens, and sometimes cats that would have to be drowned anyway, and there would be betting to see which of the cats or chickens or rats the hound would seize first. The animals were turned loose. 3 seconds later, the game was done. The rat, cat, or chicken caught halfway across the areaway, gripped in gentling paws, while a 4-inch hollow steel needle plunged down from the proboscis of the hound to inject massive jolts of morphine or procaine. The pawn was then tossed in the incinerator. A new game began. So just to be clear, what these men do for fun is feed innocent animals to this horrifying machine that they have, and that's what they do for entertainment, which I think tells us something about those people, but you can guess it by yourself. Montag stayed upstairs most nights when this went on. There had been a time 2 years ago when he had bet with the best of them and lost a week's salary and faced Mildred's insane anger, which showed itself in veins and blotches. But now nights he lay in his bunk, face turned to the wall, listening to the whoops of laughter below and the piano string scurry of rat feet, the violin squeaking of mice, and the great shadowing motion silence of the hound leaping out like a moth in the raw light, holding its victim, inserting needle, and going back to its kennel to die as if a switch had been turned. Montag touched the muzzle. The hound growled. Montag jumped back. The hound half rose in its kennel and looked at him with green-blue neon light flickering in its suddenly activated eyebulbs. It growled again, a strange, rasping combination of electrical sizzle, a frying sound, a scraping of metal, a turning of cogs that seemed rusty and ancient with suspicion. No, boy, said Montag, his heart pounding. He saw the silver needle extend upon the air an inch, pull back, extend, pull back. The growl simmered in the beast, and it looked at him. Montag backed up. The hound took a step from its kennel. Montag grabbed the brass pole with one hand. The pole, reacting, slid upward and took him up through the ceiling quietly. He stepped off it in the half-lit deck of the upper level. He was trembling, and his face was green-white. Below, the hound had sunk back down upon its 8 incredible insect legs and was humming to itself again, its multifaceted eyes at peace. Montag stood, letting the fears pass by the drop hole. Behind him, 4 men at a card table under a green-lighted light in the corner glanced briefly but said nothing. Only the man with the captain's hat and the sign of the phoenix on his hat, at last curious, his playing cards in his thin hand, talked across the long room. Montag? It doesn't like me, said Montag. What, the hound? The captain studied his cards. Come off it. It doesn't like or dislike. It just functions. It's like a lesson in ballistics. It has a trajectory we decide on for it. It follows through. It targets itself, homes itself, and cuts off. It's only copper wire, storage batteries, and electricity. Montag swallowed. Its calculators can be set to any combination, so many amino acids, so much sulfur, so much butyric and alkaline, right? We know all that. All those chemical balances and percentages of all of us here in the house are recorded in the master file downstairs. It would be easy for someone to set up a partial combination on the hound's memory, a touch of amino acids perhaps. That would account for what the animal did just now. Reacted toward me. Hell, said the captain. Irritated, but not completely angry, just enough memory set up in it by someone so it growled when I touched it. Who would do a thing like that? Asked the captain. You haven't any enemies here, Guy. None that I know of. We'll have the hound checked by our technicians tomorrow. This isn't the first time it's threatened me, said Montag. Last month it happened twice. We'll fix it up, don't worry. But Montag did not move and only stood thinking of the ventilator grill in the hall at home and what lay hidden behind the grill. If someone here in the firehouse knew about the ventilator, mightn't they tell the hound? The captain came over to the drop hole and gave Montag a questioning glance. I was just figuring, said Montag. What does the hound think about down there at night? Is it coming alive on us? Really? It makes me cold. It doesn't think anything we don't want it to think. I'm going to read that line again because I feel like even though they're talking about this hound machine, that feels like maybe it's talking about the people in this world. It doesn't think anything we don't want it to think. That's sad, said Montag quietly, because all we put into it is hunting and finding and killing. What a shame if that's all it could ever know. And again, I think that's a pretty telling line about this book so far. What a shame if that's all it can ever know. If all they can ever know. If all we, as people living in Holland in 2020, that's all we ever know. Beatty snorted gently. Hell, it's a fine bit of craftsmanship, a good rifle that can fetch its own target and guarantees the bullseye every time. That's why, said Montag, I wouldn't want to be its next victim. Why? You got a guilty conscience about something? Montag glanced up swiftly. Beatty stood there looking at him steadily with his eyes while his mouth opened and began to laugh very softly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. As many times as he came out of the house, and Clarice was there somewhere in the world. Once he saw her shaking a walnut tree, once he saw her sitting on the lawn knitting a blue sweater, 3 or 4 times he found a bouquet of late flowers on his porch, or a handful of chestnuts in a little sack, or some autumn leaves neatly penned to a sheet of white paper and thumbtacked to his door. Every day Clarice walked him to the counter. One day it was raining, the next day it was clear, the day after that the wind blew strong, and the day after that it was mild and calm, and the day after that, calm day, was a day like the furnace of summer, and Clarice with her face all sunburnt by late afternoon. Why is it, he said one time at the subway entrance, I feel I've known you so many years. Because I like you, she said. I don't want anything from you. And because we know each other. I like you and I don't want anything from you. It was a pretty profound statement on relationship. You make me feel very old and very much like a father. Now, you explain, she said, why you haven't any daughters like me if you love children so much. I don't know. You're joking. I mean... He stopped and shook his head. Well, my wife, she just never wanted any children at all. The girl stopped smiling. I'm sorry. I really thought you were having fun at my expense. I'm a fool. No, he said. It was a good question. It's been a long time since anyone cared enough to ask a good question. And again, let's read that again. It's been a long time since anyone cared enough to ask. Which I feel like is a statement on what's happening in this book, and also a profound statement about the ways that we live our lives and the ways that asking questions about people around us is a pretty beautiful thing. Let's talk about something else. Have you ever smelled old leaves? Don't they smell like cinnamon? Here, smell! Why, yes, it is like cinnamon in a way. She looked at him with her clear, dark eyes. You always seem shocked. It's just, I haven't time. Did you look at the stretched out billboards like I told you to? I think so, yes, he had to laugh. Your laugh sounds much nicer than it did. Does it? Much more relaxed. He felt at ease and comfortable. Why aren't you in school? I see you every day wandering around. Oh, they don't miss me, she said. I'm antisocial, they say. I don't mix. I'm strange. I'm very social indeed. It all depends on what you mean by social, doesn't it? Social to me means talking to you about things like this. She rattled some chestnuts that had fallen off the tree in the front yard. Or talking about how strange the world is. Being with people is nice, but I don't think it's social to get a bunch of people together and then not let them talk, do you? An hour of TV class, an hour of basketball or baseball or running, another hour of transcription history or painting pictures, and more sports. But do you know, we never ask questions. Or at least most don't. They just run the answers at you, bing, 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 and us sitting there for 4 more hours of film teacher. That's not social to me at all. It's a lot of funnels and a lot of water poured down the spout and out of the bottom and then telling us it's wine when it's not. They run us so ragged by the end of the day we can't do anything but go to bed or head for a fun park to bully people around, break window panes in the window smasher place, or wreck cars in the car wrecker place with the big ball of steel. Or go out in the cars and race on the streets trying to see how close you can get to lampposts, playing chicken and knock hubcaps. I guess I'm everything they say I am, all right. I haven't any friends. That's supposed to prove I'm abnormal, but everyone I know is either shouting or dancing around like a wild or beating up one another. Do you notice how people hurt each other nowadays? You sound so very old. Sometimes I'm ancient. I'm afraid of children my own age. They kill each other. Did it used to not be that way? My uncle says no. 6 of my friends have been shot in the last year alone. 10 of them died in car wrecks. I'm afraid of them, and they don't like me because I'm afraid. My uncle says his grandfather remembered when children didn't kill each other, but that was a long time ago when they had things different. They believed in responsibility, my uncle says. Do you know I'm responsible? I was spanked when I needed it years ago. And I do all the shopping and housekeeping by hand. But most of all, she said, I like to watch people. Sometimes I ride the subway all day and look at them and listen to them. I just want to figure out who they are and what they want and where they're going. Sometimes I even go to the fun parks and ride in the jet cars where they race along the edge of town at midnight and the police don't care as long as they're insured. As long as everyone has 10,000 insurance, everyone's happy. Sometimes I sneak around and listen in subways or I listen at soda fountains, and do you know what? What? People don't talk about anything. Oh, they must. No, not anything. They name a lot of cars or clothes or swimming pools mostly and say, how swell. But they all say the same things and nobody says anything different from anyone else. And most of the time in the caves they have the joke boxes on and the same jokes most of the time, or the musical wall lit up and all the colored patterns running up and down, but it's only color and all abstract. And the museums, have you ever been? All abstract. That's all there is now. My uncle says it was different once. A long time back, sometimes pictures said things or even showed people. Your uncle said, your uncle must be a remarkable man. He is. He certainly is. Well, I gotta be going. Goodbye, Mr. Montag. Goodbye. Goodbye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, the firehouse. Montag, you shin that pole like a bird up a tree. 3rd day. Montag, I see you came in the back door this time. The hound bother you? No. 4th day. Montag, a funny thing. Heard tell this morning, fireman in Seattle purposely set a mechanical hound to his own chemical complex and let it loose. What kind of suicide would you call that? 5, 6, 7 days, and then Clarice was gone. He didn't know what there was about the afternoon, but it was not seeing her somewhere in the world. The lawn was empty, the trees empty, the street empty, and while at first he did not even know he missed her or was even looking for her, the fact was that by the time he reached the subway, there were vague stirrings of dis-ease in him. Something was the matter. His routine had been disturbed, a simple routine, true, established in a few short days, and yet he almost turned back to make the walk again, to give her time to appear. He was certain if he tried the same route, everything would work out fine. But it was late, and the arrival of his train put a stop to his plan. The flutter of cards, motion of hands, of eyelids, the drone of the time voice in the firehouse ceiling, 1:35 Thursday morning, November 4th, 1:36, 1:37 a.m., the tick of the playing cards on the greasy tabletop, all the sounds came to Montag behind his closed eyes, behind the barrier he had momentarily erected. He could feel the firehouse full of glitter and shine and silence of brass colors, the colors of coins, of gold, of silver. The unseen men across the table were sighing on their cards, waiting. 1:45, the voice clock mourned out the cold hour of cold morning of a still colder year. What's wrong, Montag? Montag opened his eyes. The radio hummed somewhere. War may be declared any hour. This country stands ready to defend its... The firehouse trembled as if a great flight of jet planes whistled a single note across the black morning sky. I also need to tell you that I cannot believe the timing of a plane driving over at that time, and I did that on purpose. I'm such a good teacher. You are welcome. That's my best magic trick ever. Montag blinked. Beatty was looking at him as if he were a museum statue. At any moment, Beatty might rise and walk about him, touching, exploring his guilt and self-consciousness. Guilt? What guilt was that? Your play, Montag. Montag looked at these men whose faces were sunburnt by 1,000 real and 10,000 imaginary fires, whose work flushed their cheeks and fevered their eyes, these men who looked steadily into their platinum igniter flames as they lit their eternally burning black pipes. They, and their charcoal hair and soot-covered brows and bluish ash-smeared cheeks, were where they had shaven close, but their heritage showed. Montag started up, his mouth opened. Had he ever seen a fireman that didn't have black hair, black brows, a fiery face, and blue steel shaved but unshaven look? These men were all mirror images of himself. Were all firemen picked then for their looks as well as their proclivities? The color of cinder and ashes about them, and the continual smell of burning from their pipes. Captain Beatty was there, rising in thunderclouds of tobacco smoke. Beatty opened a fresh tobacco packet, crumpling the cellophane into a sound of fire. Montag looked at the cards in his own hand. I've been thinking about the fire last week, about the man whose library we fixed. What happened to him? They took him screaming off to the asylum. He wasn't insane. Beatty arranged his cards quickly. Any man's insane who thinks he can fool the government and us. I tried to imagine, said Montag, just how it would feel. I mean to have firemen burn our houses and our books. We haven't any books. But if we did have some? You got some? Beatty blinked slowly. No. Montag gazed behind them to the wall with the typed list of 1,000,000 forbidden books. Their names leapt in fire, burning down the years under his axe and his hose, which sprayed not water, but kerosene. No! But in his mind, a cool wind started up and blew out the ventilator grill at home, softly chilling his face. And again he saw himself in a green park, talking to an old man, a very old man, and the wind from the park was cold too. Montag hesitated. What? Was it always like this? The firehouse, our work? I mean, once upon a time, Beatty said. What kind of talk is that? Fool, thought Montag to himself, you'll give it away. At the last fire, a book of fairy tales, he'd glanced at a single line. I mean, in the old days, before homes were completely fireproofed. Suddenly it seemed a much younger voice was speaking for him. He opened his mouth, and it was Clarice McClellan saying, didn't firemen prevent fires rather than stoke them and get them going? Just so we're clear what happened, he is not supposed to accidentally read the books when he is lighting them on fire, but he did, and that's where he got the phrase once upon a time, which is a dead giveaway that he's maybe been reading the book on accident, which he's not supposed to do. That's rich! Stoneman and Black drew forth their rule books, which also contained brief histories of the firemen of America, and laid them out where Montag, though long familiar with them, might read. Established 1790, to burn English-influenced books in the colonies. First fireman, Benjamin Franklin. Rule 1, answer the alarm swiftly. 2, start the fire swiftly. 3, burn everything. 4, report back to the firehouse immediately. 5, stand alert for other alarms. Alarms with a capital A, in case you were wondering. Everyone watched Montag. He did not move. The alarm sounded. The bell in the ceiling kicked itself 200 times. Suddenly, there were 4 empty chairs. The cards fell in a flurry of snow. The brass pole shivered. The men were gone. Montag sat in his chair. Below, the orange dragon coughed to life. Montag slid down the pole like a man in a dream. The mechanical hound leapt up in its kernel, its eyes all green flame. Montag, you forgot your helmet! He seized it off the wall behind him, ran, leapt, and they were off, the night wind hammering about their siren scream and the mighty metal thunder. It was a flaking 3-story house in the ancient part of the city, a century old if it was a day, but like all houses, it had been given a thin, fireproof plastic sheath many years ago, and this preservative shell seemed to be the only thing holding it in the sky. Here we are. The engine slammed to a stop. Beatty, Stoneman, and Black ran up the sidewalk, suddenly odious and fat in their plump, fireproof slickers. Montag followed. They crashed the front door and grabbed at a woman. Though she was not running, she did not try to escape. She was only standing, weaving from side to side, her eyes fixed upon a nothingness in the wall as if they had struck her at a terrible blow on the head. Her tongue was moving in her mouth, and her eyes seemed to be trying to remember something, and then they remembered, and her tongue moved again. Play the man, Master Ridley. We shall this day light a candle by God's grace in England, as I trust shall never be put out. Enough of that, said Beatty. Where are they? He slapped her face with amazing objectivity and repeated the question. The old woman's eyes came to a focus upon Beatty. You know where they are, or you wouldn't be here, she said. Stoneman held out the telephone alarm clock with the complaint signed in telephone duplicate on the back. Have reasons to suspect attic. 11 number Elm, City E.B. That would be Mrs. Blake, my neighbor, said the woman, reading the initials. All right, men, let's get 'em. Next thing, they were up in the musty blackness, swinging silver hatchets at doors that were, after all, unlocked, tumbling through like boys all rollicking and shout, "Hey!" A fountain of books sprang down upon Montag as he climbed, shuddering, up the sheer stairwell. How inconvenient. Always before it had been like snuffing out a candle. The police went first and adhesive taped the victim's mouth and bandaged him in their glittering beetle cars, so when you arrived, you found an empty house. You weren't hurting anyone, you were only hurting things. And since things really couldn't be hurt, since things felt nothing, and things don't scream or whimper, as this woman might begin to scream and cry out, there was nothing to tease your conscience later. You were simply cleaning up. Janitorial work, essentially. Everything in its proper place. Quick with the kerosene. Who's got a match? But now, tonight, someone had slipped. This woman was spoiling the ritual. The men were making too much noise, laughing, joking, to cover her terrible, accusing silence below. She made the empty rooms roar with accusation and shake down a fine dust of guilt that was sucked in their nostrils as they plunged about. It was neither cricket nor correct. Montag felt an immense irritation. She shouldn't be here on top of everything. Books bombarded his shoulders, his arms, his upturned face. A book lit almost obediently like a white pigeon in his hands, wings fluttering. In the dim, wavering light, a page hung open, and it was like a snowy feather, the words delicately painted thereon. In all the rush and fervor, Montag had only an instant to read a line, but it blazed in his mind for the next minute, as if stamped there with fiery steel. Time has fallen asleep in the afternoon sunshine. He dropped the book. Immediately another fell into his arms. Montag, up here! Montag's hand closed like a mouth, crushed the book with wild devotion, with an insanity of mindfulness to his chest. The men above were hurling shovelfuls of magazines into the dusty air. They fell like slaughtered birds, and the women stood below, like a small girl among the bodies. Montag had done nothing. His hand had done it all. His hand, with a brain of its own, with a conscience and a curiosity in each trembling finger, had turned thief. Now, it plunged the book back under his arm, pressed it tight to sweating armpit, rushed out empty with a magician's flourish. Look here! Innocent, look! He gazed, shaken, at that white hand. He held it way out as if it were far-sighted. He held it close as if he were blind. Montag, he jerked about, don't stand there like an idiot. The books lay like great mounds of fishes left to dry. The men danced and slipped and fell over them. Titles glittered, their fallen eyes falling, gone. Kerosene! They pumped the cold fluid from the numeraled 451 tanks strapped to their shoulders. They coated each book. They pumped rooms full of it. They hurried downstairs, Montag staggering after them in the kerosene fumes. Come on, woman! The woman knelt among the books, touching the drenched leather and cardboard, reading the gilt titles with her fingers while her eyes accused Montag. You can't ever have my books, she said. You know the law, said Beatty. Where's your common sense? None of those books agree with each other. You've been locked up here for age with a regular damn Tower of Babel. Snap out of it! The people in those books never lived. Come on now. She shook her head. The whole house is going up, said Beatty. The men walked clumsily to the door. They glanced back at Montag, who stood near the woman. You're not leaving her here, he protested. She won't come. Force her then. Beatty raised his hand in which was concealed the igniter. We're due back at the house. Besides, these fanatics always try suicide. The pattern's familiar. Montag placed his hand on the woman's elbow. You can come with me. No, she said. Thank you anyway. I'm counting to 10, said Beatty. 1, 2, please, said Montag. Go on, said the woman. 3, 4, here, Montag pulled at the woman. The woman replied, I want to stay here. 5, 6. You can stop counting, she said. She opened the fingers of one hand slightly, and in the palm of the hand was a single, slender object. An ordinary kitchen match. The sight of it rushed the men out and down from away from the house. Captain Beatty, keeping his dignity, backed slowly through the front door, his pink face burnt and shiny from 1,000 fires and night excitements. God, thought Montague, how true. Always at night the alarm comes, never by day. Is it because fire is prettier by night, more spectacle, a better show? The pink face of Beatty now showed the faintest panic in the door. The woman's hand twitched on the single matchstick. The fumes of kerosene bloomed up about her. Montague felt the hidden book pound like a heart against his chest. Go on, said the woman, and Montague felt himself back away and away out the door after Beatty, down the steps, across the lawn, where the path of kerosene lay like the track of some evil snail. On the front porch where she had come to weigh them quietly with her eyes, her quietness a condemnation, the woman stood motionless. Beatty flicked his fingers to spark the kerosene. He was too late. Montague gasped. The woman on the porch reached out with contempt to them all and struck the kitchen match against the railing. People ran out of houses all down the street. It's an awful moment. I think it's, in a lot of ways, an evil moment. But I want to point out two things. One, the way that the captain refers to this as a pattern, right? A person who is so willing to fight for what they believe in, which is like knowledge, which is thought in this case, that she's going to die with this book, with these books, with this knowledge. And instead of seeing a person die, he just says this is a pattern, right? This is a pattern of these crazy people do. And then people ran out of their houses down the street to watch a woman burn to death inside this building, because that's what these men just came and did. They just lit her house on fire and she's inside of it. And people just want to watch because they don't think about what's actually happening in this moment.